actually first started doing this talk earlier this year, actually, and I'll tell you the story. So tonight's storytelling night, in case you didn't know. What this is I'm going to give you a little bit of my history, and I have 3 main pillars of what I consider overnight success and what it takes to get there. To start out with, there's my stuff. So if you're interested in following me online, there's that. I'm not that exciting. Last night I went to my first Jimmy Buffett concert, and I was drinking this big like margarita and it looked like a bong, right? And I was like, oh my God, right? So I had to take it all off online because I forget now I'm like employed by other people and I can't have stuff like that online. And I was like, oh, if it was just me, I was self-employed for 16 years. It was like not a big deal, right? And then I was like, oh man, if I get into work tomorrow morning and they think I'm like, so I had to take it down. So I'm sad to say I'm self-censoring my Twitter stream now. So the idea of this talk is to be inspirational, educational, informative, tell you a bit about my story, but it's meant to make you think a lot, and it's not meant to like be like kumbaya, like let's walk on coals. But I guess let's see if I can get through this. There it goes. There I am. Part of what the catalyst for the story is that when Google Plus first came out, I, like most people that geek out on technology online, social technology anyway, joined up really quick, kind of brought over my old tribe of friends and went in, and I had hit what some would consider success with it. And when I had seen people that I had worked with or known for 10 years, 20 years, 25 years, they were like, wow, Lynette, you're an overnight success, that's awesome. And I was like, damn, I've been doing this for a quarter century. What do you mean overnight? I work my butt off. So it really got me thinking about what it takes to get where we want to go. And this could be professionally, it could be with our products, it could be with a startup, it could be with anything. So before I started AWeber, I kind of had to edit my slides to like shoehorn AWeber in there because it's only been not even 90 days yet. I was a self-employed business owner for 16 years, and I've gone through a couple businesses. Some failed spectacularly, some went very well. Don't tell AWeber, but I still have my other business open. I wrote a book that was exciting and it sucked at the same time. I consider myself a marketing technology professional because that's really my roots. Prior to Y2K and the insanity there, I was strictly in technology. I moonlighted for a little while before that, and then I made the jump, which you'll hear the story in a bit. I am a huge Google Plus fangirl. I like basically any technology that gives me access to video, live streaming, and texting with people. So that was it, and I'm a self-proclaimed geek, and I'm raising 2 of them at home. So the first thing I wanted to talk about, I usually want to pace, I can't pace today, is this idea of perception, right? So when you looked at that other picture, Iceberg. Funny thing about icebergs is when you see them, only 10% of the actual iceberg exists above the waterline. That's the only part we see. And this analogy struck home to me because a lot of what we do is behind the scenes, that wizard behind the curtain. No one ever sees our successes, the hard work, the things that we do day to day, the grind to get stuff done. We're just kind of looking at the 10%, right? We're looking at what's on our Twitter feed, what the new function of the app is that we push out, whatever the new bullet point we get on our resume. Those are the things that people see. What they don't see is us working till midnight, 1 o'clock, 5th Red Bull of the day, failed pieces of product, code, just everything that we have to do, that we have to flush, or that we have to grind through just to get to the 90% that rises the 10% above. So the beginning of my story kind of goes back to the late 80s. I was in technology then. I don't think, well, maybe there'll be a couple people in this audience that know, but I was a network engineer and I was a token ring expert. So that was like, now I could go to Detroit and get hired because Token Ring is the only network they use in the car manufacturing. So yeah, I probably make a lot of money, just like the old COBOL guys would get paid a lot of money. I didn't stick with it though. So this idea of perception. I was 23 years old and had worked my way out of college. I didn't graduate because I quit college so I could teach college, because the technology back then wasn't moving fast enough to my taste or to what business was. Much as like, we don't see it so much anymore, but back in the late 80s and the early 90s, first of all, it was very rare for women to be in school for tech. I was the only female in my coding classes. And my instructors would always tease me that, I should get them coffee or things like that. So that was pretty much wrapped up my technical career. So I actually quit college so I can go from Rutgers to a community college and teach, and my old professor that used to try to get me to fetch him coffee was in my class so he could retool himself to get back in and teach, which I thought was extremely ironic, and I failed him. Loved it. So this idea of me trying to be out ahead of the pack and this perception of what other people saw me as, they saw me as an extremely young woman, a female in technology at 23 years old in a management position. The company I was working at the time had 40 developers. It was all DOS-based back then. It was horrible. 40 developers, and there were about 3 managers. I was one manager in the department, and there were probably 2 or 3 other women. The other women in the department were admins. So that kind of gives you the lay of the land. One day I'm sitting there and I'm going through and I'm doing employee reviews and all that really boring paperwork that I'm now relearning at AWeber. And I realized that every single person that worked for me made more money for me, they were all men, and had better titles than me. And I was like, well, this kind of sucks. Like, I'm an idiot because I'm 23 or 22 at that point, and I decide that I'm going to march into my boss's office and set this straight. Made an appointment with him. I was like going to have this all done. In the meantime, I had gotten a job offer for nearly double my salary at what I did wind up leaving and going to Merrill Lynch. So I had on the dot matrix printer, had my little fancy my resignation letter signed, and I was ready to walk in there and quit. And the only thing that I wanted from my boss's boss was a better title. I wanted new business cards. Wasn't even smart enough to ask for a raise because that was very uncomfortable for me to ask someone that was really the age of my father to go in and say, can I have more money? I think I'm worth it. Everybody under me is making more money and I work just as hard as they do. Didn't do that. So my boss looks at me and he says, no, because business cards are very expensive, and how dare you come in here and think that you're better than everyone else because you want another title, you want, to be all fancy. And this is where he taught me the idea of perception, of what other people see me as. And some of that has to do with, kind of the vibe that I give out, and some of it has to do with their own luggage and baggage that comes to the table. He had his own, trust me on that. And so we had this, he's like, sit down, Lynette. I said, okay. So he had this big brass P, because his name was Paul, like a big bookend on his table, and he had this gorgeous corner office. It was a very antiquated type old boys club company. And he said, Lynette, do you know what this P stands for? Well, we had our nicknames for what we thought it stood for. But I said it stands for Paul, and he's like, no, it stands for perception. And then he went through this entire tirade of like yelling at me over his desk because he wouldn't come out from behind his desk because that was like his seat of authority. And he yelled at me for about an hour, and I just sat there crying in his little chair that he had set up for me that was probably very strategically 2 feet lower than his, right? And so he sat there belittling me, telling me all the things that I've done wrong over the 3 or 4 years that I had worked there, and all of the things that he had to come in and fix for me, and just all of this business. And I was really, did it shut off? It's just boring kind of quotes anyway. I just really want to do cat photos on slides. So he went through and he did this entire thing about what his perception of me was. And he kept pointing to that P and he goes, you need to drill this into your head. And I said, okay. So I had this letter of resignation in my hand and I crumpled it up because me, being the idiot that I was at 23, said I'm supposed to stay at this company longer until I can fix this, right? I can't leave this company, I can't leave my employees, I can't leave our clients until I fix his perception of me and everybody loves me. Well, that was the first thing that I learned with him, is that not everybody's going to love you. So I didn't want to quit. I crumpled up that letter. And then he stood up and he looked at me and he said, you know what else the P stands for, Lynette? And I'm thinking it still stands for Paul. And he said, no. And he named a part of the female anatomy that starts with a P. And he called it to my face and he leaned over his desk and he screamed it at me. And I lost my mind. This was probably 93, how old when I was only 23. And that's what he said to me, and he just sat back and he expected me to just completely walk out and cry. And what I always like to tell at the talks is I didn't send him to the hospital and I didn't get arrested, so that was a start. There was a little bit of a physical altercation. I picked up that brass P and I threw it across the room. It's not also my first forte into throwing things at work. But I threw that because I was so angry, like I didn't know what else to do, right? Like, what do you say when someone comes to you and says that my perception of you is only what you are? It's not what you do, what you're worth, your talent, your experience, nothing. It's only what you are. I was very naive up until that point, so I learned a lot. We had people running into the office. His secretaries actually thought that he was assaulting me when really I was like climbing over the desk at him. It was pretty bad, and I was in a skirt, my heels were flipped back, I just kind of went like Full Metal Jacket on him. It was pretty bad. But he taught me a life lesson that I remember still to this day, but how people's perception is extremely important of what you do. And I see with social media specifically, because that's my background, that everybody's so worried about curating, the most perfect picture, the most perfect tweet, the most perfect status update or blog post about what you are. You're formulating this lie about what you want out there. And I'm also going to say and beg, don't just go out and be very sad on things, and because we all see that too, but I'm talking about being realistic. And I'm talking about thinking about what you put out there in your products, in your work with potential clients, in your communications with your coworkers, because everything that you say, write, or do adds to their perception of you, right? So they're not going to think you're completely crazy if you don't do completely crazy things. It's the strongest, I guess, perception that I can give to you is, put out in the world what you want to be. Right now, my husband is, if I call him a startup, he'll smack my hand because he's been in business for almost 30 years and he's just releasing another product. But he's got a SaaS product out right now, and the perception from his clients is that he's this big, huge company, right? And a lot of us want to feel that way when we're starting out 2, 3, 4 people, if that, working nights and weekends. And we feel that if people see us for what we are, for the small teams that we are, for the whatever, that they're going to shy away from us. But I'm even trying to explain to him, he's a team of one, and he's built code like I've not seen come into teams that I've worked with. Let people see you for what you are. Don't be afraid of hiding it. Don't try to make yourself bigger than what you are, because it will come back and bite you. I feel if you're honest up front, that will really help. I wound up quitting that job and going to Merrill Lynch, and I was very honest and open with a lot of the communication that I did with my future employers, where when I was at the company that I was at, I was very afraid of hiding my age, couldn't hide my gender, and I was afraid of I tried to hide what I perceived as my inexperience. I'm just saying, don't do, I'm going to suggest, I'm not going to say, but don't feel that you have to do that, because it's very important for people to see you where you're at and work with you where you're at. So the quotes I just threw up are ones that I thought were really cool. Because this is great. It's what people in the world think of you is really none of your business, right? If you're so worried about what other people say or think or do about you, you're never going to get to where you actually want to go. So I quit my job very vocally, and I wound up taking another job for more money, and they turned up giving me a bonus when I walked in the door of about 10 grand, which was a huge amount of money back in the early 90s. And I kept my head down and I did what I was supposed to do, and I worked my way up the ladder, and I thought I was supposed to be in corporate my whole life, and I wound up meeting my husband there, so that part kind of rocked. That was the best part I got out of that gig. But the idea that I was just supposed to go down and keep the path of what I intended to do. My parents before me, they would go and they'd work at Bell Labs or AT&T, and they would stay there their whole lives. They would get a watch and a pension, and they would leave, and they would go to Boca Raton, and then they would die in 15 years. Like, that was the path, right? Our paths are different than that right now. We're not supposed to be on a straight linear path. We're not always supposed to be corporate. Sometimes we fall backwards or sideways to go where we're supposed to go. And sometimes we get off that damn line and get on a different one and do something completely different. Like, you'll see what I did. So this idea of perseverance is something that I thought that I was supposed to just grind through. So we go from the mid-90s to Y2K, and if anybody worked in technology back then, especially finance, pharma, big corporate, whatever, you knew they were all insane, because they literally thought the world was going to stop because 2 digits in some code from 15 years ago didn't function properly. I wound up quitting my job then because I was also on a maternity leave, and I figured, well, if my husband can be self-employed and have a consulting firm and do this, so can I. He was my crutch to do this, to get out of corporate. So I went out on maternity leave. I got married, went out on maternity leave. Go back. My husband's working in New York, down the World Trade Center at this point. My daughter is 1 month old. She is a colicky little 10-pound thing that I have no clue what to do with. And I begged my husband to stay home with me because I could not stand the thought of another day of being with this child that I couldn't control, right? Like I was used to being in control in a corporate environment. And I was really looking at my future going, what am I supposed to do? I have to grind through this. I have to persevere, right? Just so happens the day that I begged him to stay home from work was September 11th. His building was catty corner from the World Trade Centers. And we were actually talking about this last night. He didn't realize I was coming here. He can't watch these videos. He can't listen to me do this talk because it affects him too much. But he was supposed to be in those buildings that day, and he stayed home with me instead. And as we're home, you know, as a lot of us do, we leave our IM and our chat and our Skype, which I don't even think existed back then, on in our computers. He sits down on his computer as we're watching the news, and there's just message after message after message. All of his old coworkers that didn't survive their spouses were messaging, hoping that my husband was still at work and that the building was okay. Well, because if they can reach him, then maybe their spouse was okay, and that wasn't the case. My husband was one of the only ones in his consulting firm that he was working for that actually survived, and it was only because he wasn't there that day. That event changed my life. I always tell my daughter, and she's so cocky now, she's 13, she's like, I saved Daddy's life. I'm like, you're going to kill him now because you're a teenager. She just turned 13. So that event made us really think. He still won't go into New York and work to this day. I mean, I go there for events and stuff, but he hasn't reached that point where he's able to get past that. The idea that I could go back to work in an environment, and obviously the work was much different back then, we were like, what are we going to do? We did what we're supposed to do up until this point. Now the entire world, the entire economy, our entire lives in IT is different now. So I took all the money, because I had planned after maternity leave to start my own consulting business, much like I was doing moonlighting, and I took all of my money, like 6 figures of money, and I opened a scrapbook store. My husband was like, are you flipping crazy? And I was like, yes, I am. And I ditched everything that I knew to that point and opened a scrapbook store. And I wound up going right back into my old business. But what happened there is I met people that taught me that no matter what you wanted to do, you needed to grind through it and persevere. So a quick story with that is that in the scrapbook store, you work with paper arts and glues and stickers and whatever. And I would go and mentor and consult other scrapbook store owners and teach them how to run points sales and put networks in their stores and all this other kind of stuff. That I met 3 women that they would come for these nighttime crops, and they were all 3 of them were current or very formerly breast cancer survivors, right? So they were a daughter that was my age, a mother and a grandmother, and all 3 of them were there. And you just want to keep going to sleep on me. And what happened was I would teach them how to do their books, and I was also teaching people how to blog on the side at my store, even though they didn't pay me any money. One of the ladies lost her books, and she was devastated because it was all on paper. So I said, why don't you blog? It's like online journaling. It's what Pinterest was before it was actually in Pinterest. So we had all of that, and I decided that I was going to go back and do what I was really meant to do, which was go back into technology. And I had been consulting and professionally mentoring other store owners to learn how to use the internet to do this. What that all taught me was the idea that no matter what you think you want in the future, what you want to pass on, what you want to make, whatever you want to build so you can sell it or get funding for, or just have your little business on the side that you want to do, a piece of code. My husband's writing that SaaS program, and he doesn't ever want to sell it. Someday you're going to have to let go of it. But right now, he's like, I'm going to concentrate on what I have right now. That's the parts that are important to me. I'm not working today and worrying about tomorrow. I'm working today and thinking about today. So that's kind of the idea of this perseverance. We're not so much thinking about going forward anymore, but we're thinking about the right now, the people around us, and what we have to do to survive day to day. Sometimes you need to do that. So the third thing is this idea of people. And going back to the analogy of the waterline, a lot of people that I know are in different points in their career than I am. They're in different points of building their business than I am. When I first moved to AWeber, a lot of people called me a sellout. because I had been in various startup groups and small businesses and things like that. And in some circles, people considered me successful, because to be 16 years on your own and not, kind of like not go back to corporate was a big deal. But the idea that I surrounded myself with more people that supported me, rather than calling me a sellout going forward, I thought was really important. But a friend of mine always says this. He always says this is from a movie, but I always quote it to him. He's always like, people, man, people. And he says it for a good way and for a bad way. And people can really rip you down for whatever you're doing. I mean, I'm sure every single person in here can go and they can be trying to do something on their own that they're very proud of, that they're working all the long hours for, and have one person say one thing and completely pull the rug out of your self-worth and the value and the talent that you put into something. So I just kind of wanted to bring up the fact that you can do these things, ditch the people that you don't need, and work and find the people that you do need to be around. The more successful people and the more like-minded people that you put yourself around is really good, but that's not going to grow your 10% on the top. You need that 90% on the bottom. You need other people to help lift you up, to help work with you, that are different from you, that do different things from you, that have different experiences, different connections. I just met a woman last week who is a ER doctor, and she works with gunshot wound peeps. She works in Chicago. So and I'm like, she and I would have absolutely nothing in common, and as it turns out, we do. And the common part that we have is that we want to help each other get better at what we do. How I'm supposed to help a woman that works in an ER dealing with gunshot wound victims, I have no idea, but someday that will come for us. But what I realize is when you're working with people, a lot of times you're worried about, who's going to help me now? How can I get there? How can I connect with someone else? We go to events like this. I network all the time. It's like you're badge surfing. You're figuring out who's going to get me to where I want to go the fastest. And I'm asking you to slow down and think about who's going to get you to the person that's in front of you right now. What can you do that's in front of you? I was just talking to Brian over here. When I came in, I found an empty seat and I sat down next to him. I had no clue what he was about. He's, prototyping a startup, sounds amazing to me. I'm going to give my business card later. I don't know anything about him. He doesn't know anything about me, but we made a people-to-people connection. So maybe in 5 years that relationship will go somewhere professionally. I don't even know. But the more you network with the people that are in front of you and stop worrying about looking over their shoulder and trying to get where you think you want to go and slow down and look at the people in front of you, the better off I think you'll be. So the idea of people is we use them, right? We use people to get what we want to. And a lot of times we use people in a negative way to fulfill our own success. And that I've seen over and over and over in my career. I've seen it with almost every boss that I've had in my 1.0 corporate life. I've seen it in the stores and my own clients and things like that. But I kind of have a new definition of success. And this is what I'm hoping that you'll take out of this as well too. Turn on. Years ago, when I was out on my own or in corporate and I was 23 years old, I walked around business all the time thinking, I want people to say, I am successful. I want people to look at Lynette and say, she's got it going on. She has everything going together. And that's what I thought success was when other people said that, or I can say that about myself. Walking around saying, I'm successful at this, I'm really good at running meetings, I'm really good at coding, I'm really good at ripping up token ring, whatever the heck I was doing back then. And then I switched, and I said, it's more important for me to get accolades from the outside, and I want people to say, she is successful, she did all these great things. And then more recently, I realized that that's all bullshit. And the best way to success is for people to say, she helped me get successful. How many people can say that about you? How many people do you think that you can say you've helped and they can acknowledge that you've helped them get success? Yeah, so some people are raising their hands. Anybody else? Anybody else know someone in your professional life or maybe personal life that can point to you and say, yes, this person helped me? Somebody, right? So it should be everyone in here. So we worry about startups and funding and coding and getting space. And, I see this life in my husband right now. I see this life in coworkers that want to get out of, not that it's a bad company, but they just want to get out and they think something else is better. I think the best level of success that you can do is helping other people professionally and having it be a reflection of you. So this idea of perception of what other people think about you, what other people think about your company, what other people think about whatever you're doing, because the better they think about you, the more they're going to give you. That part's got to go. This idea of perseverance, I think, is still important, but I think that it's to a fault sometimes that we grind through things because we're on that path and we think that that's where we're supposed to stay. When sometimes, as painful or as expensive as it is, we're supposed to stop and go in a different direction. And the only way to understand that we're going to be able to do that is to surround ourselves with the people that have the guts to tell us that, and that we trust enough and support enough in their own endeavors that they can be honest enough with us and tell us that we need to pivot, or that we're on the right track, or whatever it is that we're supposed to really be hearing, instead of reflecting that back to us. And this, I like penguins. And I thought about it, and I saw this picture when I was putting these slides together a while ago, and I said, you know what? These penguins are really weighing people down. And what happens when you get success and you have a lot of people surrounding you and a lot of people rely on you for things? You feel like you're weighted down, right? You feel like everybody's pulling on you. Everybody wants something out of you. Everyone's in your pocket. Everyone is demanding of you because you're starting to reach a level of success, either that they see from the outside or that you're generating from yourself. And I kind of want people to stop thinking of that as a negative thing, of having more people attached to you, more people that you would consider below you on the ladder rather than above you on the ladder. People with less money versus more money, or less power versus more power. This is a fun ride, and the only way that you're going to be able to support more people, more clients, more employees, more success, is if you raise that 90% of all of those things that you do every single day, the grind that nobody sees, so that you can get the 10% bigger, so that there's a bigger ride for those penguins along the way. So that's my talk, and I just hope that it wasn't too inspirational for you. Mike took, where'd he go? Mike took a little bit of a chance on me for coming here, because I know it's a little outside of the comfort zone for some people. But my point for all of this, and every time I go in and talk to people, is I make it a little bit different, because I'm not really one for memorizing, but I really want you to think about what you're doing professionally, and those three items of perception, perseverance, and people, and how you can take that and make your life and your job and your product and your company better and not just bigger. Thank you.
And P is not for Paul. Do we have a couple of questions for Lynette? Question is, when was it? When did you think it was the right time for you to jump from the corporate world into being your own boss and doing your own thing?
Well, I'll say the answer was the same thing I say now to people, was when I was still employed. So I truly believe that people either have an entrepreneur spirit, not a small business spirit, because that is separate. I've seen people run small businesses out of necessity or heredity, like they, their parents give it to them, kind of thing. I think being an entrepreneur is much more about mindset and risk-taking and adventure to some point. And I have always had that in me. Husband 1.0 didn't have that. Husband 2.0, which is my current last husband, does. So, once you see it and once you surround yourself with people that have that, and obviously you're here, so that's a huge step, and I know you're already working on some other things, but the idea was I didn't wait until it was too late. I mean, you saw that in 05, 06, 07, friends in journalism, friends in tech, like the bottom came out, the zeros started coming off the back of their salaries. It was pretty ridiculous. They waited too late. I would say I was self-employed for 16 years, because in 96 and 97 I started freelancing on the side, because I knew that someday I was going to need the additional skills that I would get that I wasn't getting satisfied with in corporate. I knew I wanted to grow faster and follow my own talents rather than what corporate happens to need me to do in the org chart. So I always say that if you feel it, you feel it, and I know it's a really corny thing to say, but I definitely suggest kind of doing it on the side. It's really a stupid idea for anyone to just jump up and say, oh, I'm going to quit my day job. I've seen that too, and I've also seen them move back with their parents at my age. It's pretty sad. So that's kind of what I have to say about that, but I also think that if you're not burning in your core to be an entrepreneur and take risk, it is okay to just want to run a business and to build one, and there's a big difference. And I think that you have to kind of settle within yourself to know what that is.
Next question.
So number one, do you want to repeat the question?
Yeah, so the question is the difference between passion and fascination.
Okay, so I absolutely love Sally Hogshead. I saw her talk years ago with Jeffrey Gitomer, and it was kind of like an exercise in control because they're like hyper and jumping around. I haven't bought her new book yet, but I actually did take her tests, and I can't remember, I was a maestro. That's what I was. So if anybody wants to look up Sally's stuff, she's like, I don't know, it's like 32. It's like this personality test thing. I think that it's very much on, but I think, if I remember what the premise of Sally's stuff was, it was about how people perceive you and how they interact with you, not what you are and how you think you are. It was this idea of how do other people see you from the outside, which exactly, and that's much more important to me than what I think I am, because I have imposter syndrome in the worst possible way. Every day I wake up and go, why the hell did AWeber hire me? Like, I have no skill, and then I'm like, oh, maybe I'm okay, and then by the end of the day, I'm like, I rule the world, and everybody else is like, yeah, just go home, Lynette. How other people perceive you is critical, and a lot of times what we think people see us as and what that actually happens is different. I liked her stuff very much because, number one, it fed my ego, because it said I was like power and something else, and I was like, yeah, that's pretty good, but then it gave me the whole list of negatives and all of the things that I have to look out for, and be cognizant of the fact of how I interact with people could grind them the wrong way, could be perceived the wrong way. So yeah, actually, I should probably see if I can call her up on the phone, like, hey, Sally, we're old friends. But I very much do like the idea of learning how other people see you. And her test was like $50 or something, and I took it, and I liked it a lot, and it was pretty dead on for some of my friends, even though they didn't like what the answer was. Oh yeah, you can do it for free now, yeah.
All right, one last question for Lynette.
Yes.
So the question is, what was it that you weren't getting in corporate?
So why did I go back to corporate after 16 years? A couple reasons. Being a freelancer right now sucks for me because I was either chasing work, chasing invoices, or doing work. I was a solo person, right? Is anybody in here the only person in their company? Right? So you know how difficult it is sometimes. I'm not on net 9 months. Sometimes people take that long to pay. Part of what I did professionally was always try to stay ahead of the curve. I brought Coca-Cola into Second Life. Does anybody remember Second Life? Where I made cute little avatars for, Coca-Cola. And they'd spend $50,000 to get 6 avatars on an island. Like, that's really not a great ROI. It's not. But, they had more expendable income to play with than I made in 10 years. So, sure, I'll help you. But the idea that I can keep being so far ahead of the curve and get paid well for it was very difficult for me. I had purposely engineered myself out of a job every couple of years because the technology and the marketing tactics around it changed so often. And to be honest, I got a little tired of the grind. And to be even more transparent about it, I wanted to support my husband. He has a product now. It is the most niche SaaS product you will ever encounter. I don't care who's in this room. It's for public insurance adjusters. It's called Claim Wizard. It's like, I don't know, like 1/100 of 1% of like the population could actually use it. And I needed to support him. And having 2 freelancers in the family with 2 small kids is really stupid. And health insurance got expensive. And on top of that, AWeber turned out to be one of the only 3 companies in the New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania area that I was actually willing to work at because my criteria is crazy tough. What was my criteria? I view AWeber as a actually we're 16 years old today. I should have wrote a blog post about it. So much for being a content marketing manager. They're 16-year-old, self-funded, self-sufficient company that still acts like a startup that has an amazing engineering staff. And I liked the fact that they are a technology company that makes a marketing platform, and I'm a reformed technologist that likes to play in marketing. So it was extremely meta for me. And I think that was a lot of it. Plus, I knew a lot of the people that were there, and I know what's coming down the pipe. So I know what the roadmap is, and that was really exciting for me. I did turn down a job with the WWE, though. Like, that wasn't really my gig. I don't know if they wanted me in the ring or not, but, it was like I didn't jive with that on a personal and professional level, so I didn't want to take the job, but I jive with AWeber, so I wanted to take the job. So that was pretty much it. Thank you.